Last week, if you remember, we were reading the story of Jesus in Luke's Gospel, where he had just started his ministry and he decided to go home to Nazareth. And he goes into the synagogue, which was his custom. Every Sabbath, he attended worship. And he went into the synagogue and he was asked to read from the scroll, read the scripture. He read from Isaiah and said to the group of people, today, this reading, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. So, and we emphasized last week in the sermon the word today. Today the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Today God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Today God has sent me to proclaim release to the captives. Today God has sent me to proclaim the recovery of sight to the blind. Today God has sent me to let the oppressed go free. Today God has sent me to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Today, this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And the crowd in the synagogue all spoke very well of him, and they were amazed at the gracious words that came from his mouth. And they said, "Is not this Joseph's son?" And he said to them, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we have heard you did at Capernaum.' And he said, 'Truly I tell you, no prophet is welcome in his hometown.'" But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of the Israelite widows, to none, except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon, a Gentile. There were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, except the Syrian general, Naaman, also a Gentile. When they heard this, all in the synagogue were enraged. And they got up and they drove Jesus out of town. And they led him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they might hurl him off the cliff. But he passed through the midst of them and went on his way. Thus ends the reading of the word.
Thanks be to God.
Now, there are lots of people who love to quote this particular passage of Scripture out of Luke. And a lot of people who haven't got a clue what it says. Here is a group of people in his hometown, in his synagogue, who have been very impressed with the young man's articulate way of speaking, his ability, his profound ability to open and read the Scripture. Now, just think about this. There were no professional preachers in the synagogue at that time. So the people who came to read the Scripture and maybe talk about it or witness to what it meant in their lives were, well, you know, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and the carpenter. So when the carpenter's son from down the street comes and proclaims the word out of Isaiah, you know, you've got to stop erasing the idea that Jesus is the Son of God. I know we know the secret, but I want you to put yourself in the place of the people in the synagogue who are going, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" When he says to them, "Doubtless you will say to me, 'Doctor, cure yourself,'" they go, "What? What's he saying to us?" The proverb suggests a connection with the people there. care of you're saying it right. Take care of your own. Okay, you're in Nazareth now. Take care of your own. We want to see here in Nazareth what you did there in Capernaum. Because we are your familiars. We are your hometown buds. We're the people who've known you since you were just a kid. We are connected. We are connected. Yes? And he adds to this. This is kind of like pouring salt on the wound. He adds to this. A prophet is never welcome in his hometown. Okay, so we have this kid, the carpenter's son, who is standing in front of the crowd saying, doubtless you want me to do here what I did in Capernaum. And I know that prophets aren't welcome in their hometown, so me as a prophet, I am not welcome in my hometown. Well, what's the response of the folks? They're mad. Now, you know why they're mad? They're mad because they feel insulted. And you know why they feel insulted? Because Jesus has taken stories out of their own scriptures and handed them to them. Jesus has said, don't you remember when there was a famine in Israel? How gracious God was to those people who were not Israelites? How gracious God was to those who were not Jews? God did not choose the Jewish widows to be gracious to. God sent Elijah to a Gentile widow in Zarephath for him to show who God is and who God is to people who are outside the territory, people who don't belong to the chosen group. Then he gives them another example. He said, you remember Elisha. Elisha cured the leprosy of the Syrian general Naaman. There were lots of other Jewish lepers around, but Elisha's demonstration of God's grace occurred through this Syrian, this foreigner, this stranger, this person who wasn't part of the group.